Thomas, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Trond. So nice to be with you. And
Yes, it's been a while. And what are
a
you
long
doing in
time.
Switzerland? What's
I was
going
so
on?
bad. I know it's surprising. I surprised myself. I mean, we literally were banned from the US in March, and we left the US thinking like we're gonna be in France for months by in Brittany by the water, and we realized we wouldn't be able to go back. So we had to choose anywhere international with a good research spirit, and here we are, Geneva. It's great. Love it so far.
Wow, COVID has really thrown a wrench into a lot of stuff, including startup collaboration and people's lifestyles and everything. Well, let's get into all of it. I wanted to kick it off though, Thomas. We met at the Founders Forum, I believe, right? So you're heavily steeped in the founder environment for a while, so that's kind of how I know you. But I know from your background that you have a past as a clinical research professor in Paris, right, in
Yeah.
hematology.
Mhm.
So I wanted to bring that up, and because I think it's probably relevant. There are a lot of people starting AI startups these days with something to do with medical, but not all of them, have that much of a true medical research background. Um, and then you've also been in the U.S., right, in Cornell Medical College, and in New York a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, Other than that, I don't know too much about your background, other than you founded Oaken, right, with
Mhm.
Jill Wainwright. So I wanted to ask you, just as a kickoff here, what would you say in kind of in your background has meant the most to you in your professional career, and what has led you to where you are right now?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the question, Tron. And so I'm an oncologist by training, and I really wanted to learn how to treat patients. And trying to treat patients is a very complex problem that is totally unsolved today, especially in cancer. Who would think that we would be here in cancer therapy? Of course, there is a lot of progresses, CAR T cells, immunotherapy, but we still don't get it. We don't understand the biology. We don't understand why some people respond to anti-PD-1 therapy, although they're PD-1 negative. We are keeping on calling some cancer by a negative terms, such as non-small cell lung cancer. We know it's non-small cell, but we don't know what it is. Or triple negative breast cancer. Okay, it's triple negative, but what is it? And we still have this really lack of comprehension. And therefore, when I started to be a clinician, I was like, I don't want to treat my patient as a patient only. I want to understand how many clones there is in this cancer. I want to map the clones, understand the probability of relapse for every clone. And I really wanted to understand how to map out the heterogeneity of the tumors and really understand how we could make, more direct, change the way we treat patients. And I started to be interested in different technologies. And machine learning was one that was the closest from the nature, because you can actually have nonlinear models that fits better to what's real. And I started to be very interested in this field.
Thomas, I'm fascinated by this because I have looked at this topic from various angles, and one of the things that strikes me with healthcare is that because it is so extremely specialized at times, to bring these two, and it's not even just two, I'm sure, but even just if you take computer science and you add medical science, and then you actually add clinical medicine or the daily practice of actually being a doctor in a primary care situation, and you meld and mold those two together, the initial matchup isn't very obvious at all, is it?
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
both in terms of like combining the knowledge, but also they are so different.
Yeah, but I think like first you have to think about the future of physicians, right? What is a physician tomorrow? I see a physician as a machine teacher. He's going to teach machines. He's teaching students, of course, but he's teaching other people. He's also going to teach AI, because AI is going to be part of his daily life, right? He's doing it when he's on Facebook without knowing it, but he has to know how he's going to teach robots and machines to help him out in his practice.
Hmm.
And really understanding, and I think, if you're a radiologist today and you're not interested in AI, oh my god, you're not interested in what's going to replace you, right? So it doesn't make sense, right? And I think everyone should do that, and I think everyone should code to be able to have some access to more knowledge and by themselves. So
So Thomas, I love that you start from that side because one of the things that I really like about you and I admire so much is you're very humble. And to start with talking about the kind of the weaknesses in your own original profession and start from that point, I think is a very powerful message, because a lot of people would start from the other angle. They would say AI is so advanced and, these doctors have no idea. But I mean, there obviously must be the other side of the coin, which is if you are a software programmer today, the amount of medical knowledge that you would really have and need to operate and be useful in an AI for medicine context, wouldn't that also be very demanding?
No, yeah, I think first every oncologist is humble when you try to treat cancer patients. You have to be, and yeah, I think like the way to take the medical approach to AI versus the AI approach and the software engineering approach to medicine is complementary. I think the way we operate as physicians is way more unsupervised. We know that we don't know. Which is a Socrates approach type of things, and so therefore we actually want to find a few questions that can match and be answered by AI. AI is mostly trying to fit some models everywhere and trying to find things, even there are black box. And I think they're more like the way we think as physicians is we need to create knowledge here and there, and let's try to fill this gap. But I think today what's the most important thing in the field of AI is this connection between key opinion leaders and medical researchers and data scientists. And they need to work together. If you're a pure data science company working with software engineers and you don't have a medical background, you're going to build some things that are going to be black box, not useful, and you're not going to be able to actually have the usage of it. And I think understanding the performances is as important as understanding the usage of this algorithm. And you're going to miss this part. And the second thing is you're going to also miss what's the breakthrough within the models. Every models, if it works, has some breakthrough. Some features can be new targets of drugs, and you really need to be able to understand what it means on the patient side and patient level. And I think this is the interactions between the two is very important, and AI has to be interpretable for physicians to actually understand how it works. But physicians also need to understand how they can teach machines to be better and how they can monitor the performances of these models. This is very important as well. In the acceleration phase of algorithm, if you don't know how to monitor the performances and benchmark it to the reality, you can be a little bit like under the hype. And a lot of things today in AI is hyped. I'm happy.
Thomas, I wanted to ask you about these two things. So before and we're going to talk about, precisely your approach, your chosen approach as well. But I wanted to do two things first. One, if you could map the AI for medicine space for us, put it in a little bit into categories of what people
Yeah,
are
yeah,
doing,
I got
because
you.
that's number one. And then number two, we'll get to the hype versus reality. And then,
Yeah,
so let's start with mapping the AI space.
I,
What are the different things that even startups or practitioners, or how do you box this field? Who
It's a
does
really good
what?
question, and I'm sure you have a different answer, and I'd love to hear it too, because your experience at the MIT will give you a lot of feedback too. And so my feeling is like, so I always think AI as first, there is really two sides of it, and I box it in two parts: acceleration and augmentation. It's really how people should think about it, right? The first is really like how you actually accelerate processes and diagnosis. You go faster, you can do like 1,000 CT scan reading per day. And the other one is augmentation. How do you get superpowers? How can you predict from a CT scan a survival? How you can predict a response to treatment? How you can discover within a model new genes that can be targets of innovative drugs? So I think the first way to really think about it is thinking about are you in the augmentation and acceleration phase? And the both are very different because, of course, augmentation is better, it's more exciting for doctors. It doesn't threaten their roles as a radiologist, for example. And it gives them superpowers to do new things. So they really like it. But acceleration, of course, is also very important on the daily workflow to make things more efficient. The second way to really think about AI, I think first, when you know where you are in these two parts, is what is the data access and the data preparation part, and what is the data analytics side, right? And I think both are extremely important in AI. Probably the first is the most important one, is how you access high quality data sets, especially in medical fields. There is a lot of regulation, GDPR being the most stringent in Europe. You also have HIPAA. And the second part is the analytics and the algorithm. And I think like how you actually find a really good way to access the best data sets to train, and then the right algorithm to have something that works, and how your model can be generalizable. This is the last part, is you need to think about the performances, the accuracy, but you also need to think about robustness and how you can generalize the model. It's a big problem for AI. Anyone can build an AI model on shelf. It works for his data, and then it never works on any other people's data. And then the usage, how you integrate this in the workflow is very important too. So I take these three levels of reflection when I think about AI.
That's fascinating. Let's talk a little bit more about data access, just because I know there's more coming here, because you have this concept of federated learning. Before we get to Okin specifically, just explain to me, what are the specific data sets that one typically thinks of when it comes to AI for medicine? Because I know in the field of biomedicine, there's an enormous amount of databases, and historically they weren't even cooperating, right? So they were competitors. Some of them are private, some of them are locked down by law. And then there's an awful lot of databases that don't really have what you, as a computer scientist, traditionally would think of as big data, right? There are a lot of databases that have actually a bunch of small data. So talk to me a little bit more about data access and how you think about it, and how people in the space think about it.
I think exactly. So I think like there is two sides of that access: is what type of data you want to access to, and the second one is how do you want to access it to. So for the first type of data access, there is different type of data. The first one are what we call at Okin fit for AI datasets. Is datasets that are multimodal, longitudinal, usually retrospective, and are curated by the best key opinion leaders in the world. They're like datasets of 10 years of research on breast cancer with single cell, CT scan, mammographics, everything. And built with the mind of somebody that has questions in mind. For us, this is very, very, very important and interesting, because data scientists can just log in and just trying to make models and understand things. Research data sets, the best in the world. Is there a big market for that for the clients? Maybe not, because it's really R&D use, but it's very rich in the idea. The second one is really like data that are more EHR data, like clinical features data that are mapped for a lot of hospitals in the world and can be used for pricing or market access for pharma, and therefore bring a lot of economic value and not only scientific value. And of course, I bought for much larger prices. And so this is two types of different data. It's like very high quality data sets, thousands of patients maximum, or just like big chunks of patients, EHR mapped in the world, sometimes millions of patients. Of course, the second one is more big data based and has a lot of economic value. The second way is how you access data. So there is a data economy that exists in the US. It's very clear. Hospitals are data brokers. They're vendors, sorry. They really sell data every day. In the Europe, with the GDPR regulation, it's not the same. And therefore, you have a lot of a hurdle to actually broke data. You also have a big hurdle to use the GAFA technology around for the cloud data storage. We have a big story now with the Health Data Hub. It's a French institution that is trying to gather the best data sets of research of academics in France. And they was wanting to store that on Microsoft Azure cloud. Guess what? Big problems. No way. We are French. We're not doing that. I know they have to take the data out, whatever. But this is another problem. But I think like but it still reveals a lot of how you want to store data. So I think are we okay with the data brokerage and the data economy in Europe? Not really. And I think like we need to find alternative ways to access data without having to share them. And this is our idea with federated learning: is we want to build a privacy preserving approach where physicians will trust you, patients will trust you, and where like people will exchange AI without sharing data. So the idea of federated learning is you access data on premise that never leaves the hospitals. You can build an algorithm and a model on premise within the hospital firewall. And then the algorithm can travel and the model and be trained with other hospitals, but it completely respects the privacy of patients, and it doesn't include array identification risk. This is very important. Today, people say it's okay to block data because we have anonymized data sets, so it's fine. The truth is it's impossible because too many people have genotyping data sets such as 23andMe in the US, for example, and you can always cross it with this database. And therefore, whenever you have a database that has genomics, it cannot be perfectly.
Well, exactly. The moment you have genomic data, you can cross match, and you can at least know something about the data. So data never leaves the premises. That's interesting. Before we go into to Okin, because I do have a bunch of questions on what you are doing. Tell me a little bit about how you see hype versus reality, because clearly this is a space where there's now accelerated investment, which means new actors are getting into the space that haven't really invested either in AI or medical, and now they're investing in AI for medical. So what does the space look like? Who do you see as kind of the actors to reckon with? And are they only startups, by the way, or is this also a topic where larger hospitals or larger medical and pharma firms really have a stake in the game at this point?
It's a really good question. I think, like, first to end, I'm starting by the end, but pharma industry is trying to build a lot of efforts of AI internally, and they really have a strategy of internal innovation, really about building huge teams, accessing data everywhere, regrouping their own data sets. You have to imagine that pharma industries has a big hard time to regroup their own clinical trial data because they were working with CROs here and there. So they don't even have the data lakes completely formed. So I think, like, there is a lot of innovation pharma. Some are very ready. They have a lot of data sets. They have a big team. We call them pharma, AI ready pharma, and some are less ready. But that's a really big thing around the space.
Can you
And
name drop? I mean, is it pretty
yeah, I mean,
visible? Who are they?
Roche, Novartis, Bayer, probably the top one, and maybe J&J. Probably the fourth one that really has built. I have seen a strategy. Roche has seen a strategy of acquiring Flatiron to access community clinic CHR data in the US. They have foundation medicine with this, like genotyping technologies, and then they have patients in common between I think it's around, I don't know, 50K, 60K. I'm not sure about the number, but that have both Flatiron and foundation medicine, and therefore they have a lot of capabilities to understand on the data side. So data access ready, and then they have hired Mark Lee, who is the head of PhD team. He was at Very Live before, Genomic Health. Somebody that he's a clinician too, like me, a hematologist, and has a really strategy about how to build AI at scale. And he's bringing a lot of technologies inside. So I think Roche has been number one in terms of data access. And then we have Novartis, and Novartis is building great stuff. So there is Bertrand Bodson, the head of digital, that is really pushing efforts on the digital health as well as AI side. I think it's very important also that people remember it's very different. And sometimes people mix up a little bit both, right? But digital health is really something you can do with your mobile phone. AI is a really more broader space. But on the question of the hype, I really think that today the question is, during COVID, how many drugs were built by machine learning technologies? Well, I really and at the end, like, not that many, right? And what did really AI brought to COVID, as an example? It brought some triage questions that were interesting. But however, like, if you're a physician today, it's very important to have triage questions. But you know that if the patient is obese or have pulmonary problems or is old, you already know you can already have a good triage by your own intelligence. Although some technologies can really help.
I find that fascinating, actually, Thomas. In some way, COVID was extremely revealing on many sides of society, and not just medical science, but it's almost like if only COVID had come 5 years later. I mean, I've heard experts talk about the fact that synthetic biology, for instance, is so close to its breakthrough moment, but we are 5 years too early. So the people who are in that space have had to kind of patch up their work and refocus and kind of just scramble.
Yeah,
but the platform wasn't there. Like, no one could just turn around and turn on CRISPR and tweak this button and then build what the hype perhaps said that we could build.
Exactly. The same for drug discovery a little bit. So I think like drug discovery has a lot of hype in AI. And the reality is there are great companies. In silico, great company. In vitro, good company. And other companies are in recursion, very good company too. Building new stuff, finding their own data sets. The problem first with drug discovery is they never really had the good training set to train their models. If you want to build a model to train your binding of a molecule to what do you need? You need access to the molecular data of the pharma industry. You need to the molecular pipeline, and they never give this to you. And we are with federated learning find a technology to actually do that without sharing the data. But I think drug discovery also has been too much black box, and I think you need to build like quantum physics, a lot of things. I was talking to Jérôme Pessanti, who was the former CEO of Benevolent, and now is the former VP of AI at Facebook, and he was like, probably we didn't we didn't include enough, like, like physics. We were just building algorithm to predict things, but there is randomness, there is a lot of things when a molecule binds to a target, and that's really it. So today, is AI better than a really good chemist to build a new drug? I'm really not sure.
Wow. I mean, those are strong words from a startup founder in the space that has secured venture funding. It's interesting. I
Well,
like it. I think
I'm just here to say what I understand about the space. Yeah, I know, right?
no,
But
and that's why I like to hear from you. So let's move straight into move into Oaken for a while. Tell me just why did you start it and what are you focused on?
I studied Okin when I was a physician, just because I wanted to bring new ways to build precision medicine, right? And the precision medicine is, I was trying to find, I was a lymphoma guy, and I was trying to build predictors with genomic signatures and epigenomic signatures integrated to predict response to R-CHOP, which is the regular therapy, the classical reference therapy for lymphoma. But it was not working out that well. That was at Wake Cornell with Professor Malnick. And then I discovered that there was new technologies to try to make prediction, which is AI. So the idea of Okin was, how can we make prediction that will help medical research? What we really realized is, like, how hard it was for the pharma industry to work with academics and the best to access the right data sets, and actually to access the right models, and how hard it was also for some academics to have the right AI capabilities, respecting the patient's data. So the idea of Okin was really trying to connect everyone together, to really create unprecedented connections, to build this new ecosystem where people can share AI models, making a very global AI that can actually generalize without respecting the patient's privacy. At Okin, when you work with us, what's our policy on data? It's not always true with other companies. And then trying to build this environment where data scientists connect to physicians connect to other physicians with federated learning, and pharma connect to the hospitals to actually use the best AI that was built on site and improve how they develop that drug. So we really tried to focus on drug development and build this ecosystem. And gradually we understood what was the best use case to actually use all the insights and knowledge we were creating within this federated ecosystem.
Fascinating. And what has the experience been? Who are you working with, and what do you find to be the best use cases for federated learning at this point in time?
I think we have a really flagship project. We have two flagship projects, but the first one is really on an unprecedented level. It kind of covers 70 billion of assets. It's called Melody. And Melody project is a project that is granted by European fundings, and actually regroup 10 of the largest pharma in the world, sharing models around drug discovery without sharing the data and using Okin technology. There is other, like, industrial partners, but Okin is really the orchestrator on the federated learning side and the privacy and traceability side. And we do this with our software called Connect that has been installed, where people can just log in, have a remote access to data, and actually launch a federated learning algorithm. And this algorithm can be traceable, it can be federated, and it's extremely secure. You never can know who puts which data on the model. And it's the first time the pharma are collaborating on the molecular libraries. It's the biggest asset. It's a treasure that they're sitting on. They never want to share that. And it's really breaking silos, breaking competitive silos, just to build something all together. And all the pharma at the end will benefit from the same model and the same insights. This is so cool. I mean, sky is the limit for federated learning. What about trying to work on Alzheimer's disease? Everything fails. Every clinical trial fails. Pharma won't share the raw data, but why not building a federated learning algorithm that can learn about the insights of these failed trials without taking the data out of the pharma firewalls? Same for glioblastoma. No trial is positive on glioblastoma, brain tumors, right? Why? Because we can't even know if a tumor shrinks or not on the MRI, because it never really shrinks. So we need AI systems, and we need, like, to source insights in a collaborative way. Federated learning is open innovation, and it's really about breaking silos everywhere.
Thomas, this is fascinating. Tell me, you speak about shared algorithm. That surprises me a little because I thought federated learning was mostly to share the data, but are they also sharing the algorithm?
No, the real idea of federated learning is data stays on premise on
I
the side.
understand, but they're sharing something, and what they're sharing is the the
Is the
are they
algorithm built on all the data at the end, the federated learning algorithms that will benefit from it as a model?
yes, okay, but are they sharing the results of that algorithm crunching, or are those
No, they're just kind
specific
of
to? So they are specific to each partner.
the results can be trained every locally on each partners, and it's specific. The results are specific on there. But then
Yeah,
the algorithm trained on everyone, and the performance, the algorithm can be trained and tested as it is by all the companies on new molecular assets.
I'm with you, but just for a layperson, the point is these 10 companies don't necessarily have to develop the same technologies all the way through. They can work on the same platform. They're sharing their data, but they can take away. So Roche could take away lesson A and build product A, and Novartis could take away lesson B and build product B. And they don't necessarily have to collaborate, even though they have sort of shared the access to
Insight
the
on data.
data.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And but the thing is, like, the algorithm is here. Roche is not participating, but like in this case, like the pharma that are participating, all shared some of their assets. But yeah, at the end, they take the benefit of some things that learn of everyone's assets. And this is really where it's great. It's really like learning of different assets built on different like settings. And yeah, I mean, this is really what it's about. And at the end, it can be a shared model. So it can be a model that you can use for new molecules that you want to predict binding for, or you can use for Alzheimer. It would be insights, new biomarkers that could be shared to stratify patients for future trials. Hey, we discovered that this part of the brain predict response to treatments. And we built this with all of you, so you can use this little quantitative biomarker to stratify your patients in your next trial. I mean, this is shared knowledge at the end, or shared insights, or shared model of prediction. But I think it never uncovers the what is really priceless for the pharma, which is like the raw data.
So tell me a little bit about what the results have been so far. Well, for you, it's early days, I guess, for
Yeah,
results.
it's early
Uh,
days.
but for others, so give me some specifics about other AI projects in medicine and what kinds of early results have we seen? So we just talked about
I mean,
COVID, not very impressive, but for some other things.
I just give you the example of something we built at Okin because it's what I know best. Mesothelioma. Mesothelioma is a cancer that people die within like 6 to 8 months in median. It's the part of the lung that is usually linked that cover the lungs, and it was linked to asbestosis when people were going in the mines. And this cancer is also linked to a mutation called BAP21, which actually makes the incidence not decreasing that much. It's a very bad cancer. No one knows how to treat it for many reasons. Not the right chemotherapy, doesn't go really well in the tissue. And we actually had access to the largest cohort of patients in the world, thanks to our federated learning technology and the trust we create. We had 3,000 patients. And what we had is the biopsy, baseline, the response to treatments, and the outcome, the survival. And we say, let's try something hard. Let's try to see if we can predict the survival using our machine learning platform and the technology we developed in pathology called Shouder, which pre-processes the images in very little dials before applying a CNN, a neural network. And we are literally like, say, yeah, can we predict survival using just the biopsy baseline before treatment? So when you give this to a pathologist, and he can take the tumor like that, and he looks with his microscope. He cannot really tell you if the patient might survive 6 to 8 months, or 8 to 10, or 10 to 12. Right? He had no idea. He can see if there is some signs of infiltration or malignancies or division of the cells, but he cannot do that. But our model and our algorithms that we call Mesonet could. And what was very interesting was not that we had actually the possibility to predict survival using baseline pathology images, predicting the response to treatment as the treatment is homogeneous. What we had here is we could really understand how we could do that. What was interesting for us is to talk to the key opinion leaders and show them the little tiles in the image that were helpful to make the prediction happen. And we discovered that there was a pattern, and the pattern was the tumor microenvironment, the periphery of the cells, what is around the tumor, is the most important part to build the model. And we confirmed this with the best key opinion leaders. And then we discovered some cells, pleomorphic cells, that were really important to make this prediction happen. And we went deep dive in the biology, trying to confirm. So we discovered that this trauma of the cells is important for survival and can determine new subgroups that were not known before. So we can determine with new high-value subgroups that can be used to reclassify the disease in a clinical trial or in general as well. And this is so exciting. And you can go to new targets, go much further, and where you actually make a real medical breakthrough using a prediction made by AI, and collaborating with the best peers in the field.
That's fascinating, Thomas. I'm really happy about that. Tell me a little bit about how you see the market evolving, because we have talked, vaguely about kind of my sense, and I don't have the data in front of me, but that the investment levels have gone up in this space. How do you and do you look at that at all? I mean, is it relevant to you? To what extent this market for AI in medicine is sort of growing at what percentage? Like, how do you see this market evolving, more
Yeah,
importantly?
it's a very good question. I think there is two sides here. There is the side of the AI market in healthcare and the data market, right? It's
Yep.
always a little bit integrated. So the data market exists. It's buying data for medicine everywhere, for payers as well as pharma is a big thing. Mostly like data, clinical data mapped for pricing and market reasons. A lot of value here. Big business. Acquisition of Flatiron was a great company happened, but there is Concert AI, a lot of new company like that also do the same. A lot of Trinetics, great company here. When you also do that, usually you also on the data, the clinical trial operations. Can I recruit patients based on this data for my clinical trials? And that is something very important too. It's one of the priority of Verily, building a registry to actually be able to do that. And I mean, really like the baseline study is very, I mean, whenever you touch to pricing or clinical operations, you hear your big money and the market is mature, right? You have teams in place, you have budget in place, lines. There is a line in the budget is buying real world evidence data, buying pricing, market access data. That's okay. When you go to AI, I think it's a really new market, and there is no really lines of budget here to do that. And of course, if you build a new molecules and if you succeed, you have big line of budget that will be developed. But a lot of things today in AI is repurposing drugs, which is always complicated on the IP and patent side. It's not easy to defend these patents. And I think like whenever you touch to more like R&D of the pharma thing, of course the budget, even if you're super innovative, the budget are less important. And therefore the market of AI for drug development, for example, I think is going to really blow and grow. Sorry, it's going to grow, not blow. But it will take a few years because today the pharma has to open to these technologies to really make through. But the reality is you can really change how you understand the clinical trials with AI, and you can do a lot of things. But yeah, I think the market will be more mature when these tools will be regulatory graded. People want the stamp of the FDA or the EMEA, and also like I think it's gonna grow. I think the budget will change and have this. But today, I mean, like the market is very segmented. It's really pricing and operations, and the R&D on the other side. And depending where you fit, your possibility to grow on the scale of revenues is not the same.
So you were kind of hinting at this, that, well, two things. One, big pharma isn't necessarily in the best position right now to handle this. Are you thinking that there's a bit of a fear or even sort of like wishful thinking that this is going to take much longer to come to fruition, and that the big pharma is
Yeah.
kind of playing the game that the automotive industry was playing with electric vehicles? They're sort of saying, deep down we know this is going to happen, but it's not really in our interest to have it happen too soon. So we're not going to turn our entire business model around, throw out everything we ever knew about clinical trials, and go this digital route. Because what if it takes 5-10 years? Then all of this revenue that we could have had. Is that the game they're playing, or is it a more fundamental lack of understanding, or are they actually not playing, they're just more realists?
I think they're all very different on that. But I think like just to take you on the analogy of automatic cars, it's very interesting how the perception of AI for automatic cars and pharma, for example, is completely different. For example, when you drive your Tesla, are you asking, hey, please Tesla, give me the AUC accuracy, give me all the model facts of your autopilot drive. I want to be sure. And then, oh my God, like 0.787, I'm not going to drive. You don't actually ask the same stuff. When you go to a pharma and you build AI, you want to understand the model facts, which patients you were trained on, how you generalize it, what's the biology. I mean, first, I think the requirement for the pharma is very, very different. But I think the pharma, I think is starting to understand how to play with AI around. I think the pharma, there is not much acquisition M&A space in this space yet. So I think they just want to try out different solutions around, build a lot of internal efforts. But I think the problem with pharma and AI today is a cultural problem. It's very different to work in a pharma than working at Google. It's way more corporate. And I think today, I'm not sure the pharma is attracting the best talents in AI. If you're a data scientist and you're number one on Kaggle, you probably want to go to Google and not to a pharma company today. And
Well, Thomas, there are those that say that it's just a question of time and
it's a
actually of
question of time.
strategy before big tech will take over pharma and not the other
I
way
think so
around.
too. I mean, in a way, yes. I mean, if you see, Google will be able to make clinical trials with 20,000 patients. And I think pharma still have I really love pharma because I think they're the most innovative company on their way. And I think actually really great data scientists are starting to go. And I think in 2 years, 3 years, probably the best data scientists want to go to pharma and make sense of it. But I think today there is still a place for a startup ecosystem where that are really between the tech and the pharma. This is exactly us. We're right between both. We take both of both worlds and we are neutral, but we have this cultural AI fit, very geeky. And I think this is for the pharma. I think they have all interest today of not internalizing these efforts, but trying to keep things around them and play around with. And I think the strategy of the pharma today is they know they're going to be super attractive to the best talents in 2 to 3 years. They're not putting huge budget because they want to wait and see, which is actually makes sense, right? Because a lot of things is very overhyped and doesn't really fit. And maybe I think to 2 to 3 years, they made some big acquisition on the AI side, but I would not expect it before my take.
Fantastic. So Thomas, how does this then apply to governments? I mean, you are yourself involved in an EU project. The EU finances a plethora of projects, both in AI and AI for health, and then clearly also has very strong views on privacy. And you mentioned early GDPR, but there's certainly a bunch of other health regulations that apply in the EU, and then of course in the US with HEPA and and other regulations. What is government? If you were advising government right now, what, if anything, can they do apart from sort of watch this space unfold at this point in
They
time?
they can take government decisions. I mean, so take the example of France. Very good physicians, public data sets. The problem is, who does the data sets belong to and the data? If you do a CT scan in Paris, in the public hospitals, that's not happening in Emily in Paris, but might happen in the real life. Are you going to do that? Does it belong to you, the CT scan, or does it belong to the country? Because you paid zero for it, right? Or you pay some taxes. I think no one knows. There is a lot of confusion about who data belongs to in Europe in many different levels. Even in the US, it's not that clear. Therefore, I think as a government, we could take the decision saying every data produced in the public hospitals belongs to the government. You can certainly opt out in some ways, but it belongs to the government. And you're building a very fundamental asset about like having regrouped, mapped, understood all your health data built in your social ecosystem. And why not, right? But you need to make it clear. It means that it belongs to the hospitals and the government. It does not belong to you. You cannot sell your data online because you can do this today, right? And I think like maybe it's not a very liberal choice. I don't know, but this is a choice that could be taken on a high level by government. And there is enough confusion about who owns what to do that.
Well, there's confusion about who owns what, but there must also be some confusion in governments about do we know enough to regulate this right now? Like I'm sure they're scared of messing things up, both for their established powerhouses. You know, their France, for instance, and Switzerland and other countries that do have big pharma. I'm sure they don't want to do something that could become a big problem, and vice versa. They don't want to get the population against them. I mean, if they suddenly start saying, "Hey,"
you're right.
you know, and their privacy laws in the EU. So it's a little
Yeah, it would be. I mean,
bit
if
of a pickle.
I'm saying the population would react well. In France, there could be like some. There would be some strikes for sure because this is what French do. In general, yeah, I mean, probably it's taking your data out is a privation of liberty. But in France, whenever you know, like I think it's something that you would give for the greater good, right? It's better research. It could help your operations in the hospitals to work better. So. I mean, yeah, but of course, like the thing about having data that are not your own is the payers paradigm. Everybody's afraid of payers primes and taxes on that. So the payers, the way payers will pay, and of course, it's something that everybody has in mind.
Yeah. Thomas, can I get some predictions out of you? If you look at the next decade in your space, AI for medicine, what's going to happen? How fast is this going to move? I mean, considering all the things we've talked about, the technology opportunities on one hand, the government constraints on the other, the innovation in the startup space, the existing pharma industry, which is slightly entrenched, but maybe also waiting for the right moment to either start acquiring and understanding more, or obviously to react. If big tech starts to make moves into pharma, then they would have to look more like big tech. But how fast is this going to unfold, and with what consequences for kind of changing the laws of fundamental science and benefiting sick patients, which I think is both of our concerns, and certainly should be a very, very big concern. COVID is one thing, but there are so many diseases where, like you pointed out, in various types of cancer, you could see it. The glass half empty view would be, we haven't made that much progress in cancer in 30 years.
No. I really believe like AI. It's a really good question. It's really broad. I believe like first, what will change in the full spectrum, AI will accelerate many processes in hospitals. Will accelerate operations that will benefit to the patients directly. Will probably be better in some diagnoses at physicians that are hard. Will better detect patients for rare diseases. Patients today sometimes they never detected for rare diseases. That will be predicted on the CT scan, a spectrum of rare diseases, and you will have diagnosis. In rare diseases, something we never think about. The research will be federated without competitive silos, people sharing algorithms thanks to Hawking technology and federated learning. Pharma will use some insights here and there and some technologies here and there. It won't be fully, completely integrated in the next 5 years pharma workflow. I don't think so. It takes 10 years. We'll take probably the quantum computers to accelerate everything too. Quantum computers, very important step. But I think pharma will have some technology here and there, some insights used, and we'll use a AI approach to access data as well. Probably in a privacy preserving way, as we believe. I think like patients will own the data and use some blockchain technologies, not really AI, but it can be linked to sell the data and make money from it. I think a lot of patients will make a lot of money from their own data sets because the data sets will become a bigger and bigger commodity, and people will give a lot of price and money to own that. And yeah, I mean, and finally, I think the payers a lot of companies will both play with the payers and pharma game, which is a complicated game to me. I mean, and the payers, the spectrum between the payers and whatever they do with your data is going to be more and more complex, because what is the interesting prediction if you're a payer is who is going to die very early without going to the hospitals. It's probably the only predictions I'm very interested in. And it's sad to say.
Yeah. Wow. It's a fascinating time we live in, because presumably this decade will really, whether it goes as fast or slow as you said, or it goes much faster like hype says, or far, far slower like, kind of our straw man pharma executive hopes, that it'll take a little longer. How do you make these determinations? I always ask my guests, how do you on your own track these trends? How do you stay up to date? How do you glean those insights that are needed to make the predictions you just made? Can you give the listeners some idea of, in this field, I mean, do you just track other startup founders? Do you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a mix of tracking of the companies around, having a lot of collaborative efforts. I mean, AI is really about collaboration. I mean, the CEO of InSilico, Alex Vankerov, is somebody that's really like trying to create the connection and the links between every pharma in the world, every AI company. So we have a ecosystem called AI Edge in the US to speak only to regulators with one voice and with recursion, with enumerate InSilico, and really this guy has been central into linking these efforts and having people discussing around the table. So I think we kind of all know each other, and we are quite collaborative. I don't think there is no secrets. We are very open source minds. People are like, no, like share what you succeed in and share your. I had a brunch this morning with Adam from AI Cure, and we were discussing like, hey man, what's working with you? What's hard? It's a complicated business anyway, so anyway. So first, like, yeah, discussing very openly. I think then trying to track what's the thinking change in the pharma industry too, because pharma is going to be the driver to build new drugs, and they're doing amazing stuff today. But really understanding how they think about AI and having discussion at different levels, from the very top level, C levels, to people that are the data scientists within these companies. Very important sides to take. And I think like the last thing is about understanding what's the impact on the peer review papers. We have publications, Nature, Medicine, and the new papers that go out. And sometimes you have great discoveries that don't generalize well. And I think like a lot of the big question is, if you show something, is it robust? Can you use it everywhere in the world? With the same accuracy and the same AUC. So really with the same performances and the usage. Show me usage. Show me things. And I think like if this comes and there is more, there will be a lot more like payers will be ready to pay, and that will drive a lot of things. Because today, like the fact that payers don't pay back the diagnosis AI made by AI, it really like gives a lot of like it's a big problem for people.
Hmm.
Because they cannot, if you do a diagnosis company in AI and payers don't pay, the business is really hard.
Yeah, I mean, so the business model, right? I mean, that's one aspect we didn't spend so much time on, but maybe I can come back to you later, and we'll talk more about the different emerging business models within this space. Maybe I could just ask you in 1 minute to kind of explain what you think is, well, first off, maybe the easiest. What's Oaken's business model? Where do you earn the money? Because where the money is coming from is really going to determine the interest of big pharma as well. Because if
Yeah.
it's a business model that fits with theirs, that's one thing. If it's completely perpendicular, now they're going to fight against it. So how do you see those business models evolving?
I think we've been lucky with Okin because we kept we have really good revenues and traction. The idea is we kept quite a large spectrum of products because you need to adapt to pharma that are AI ready and the one that are not AI ready. You actually want to be a critic. So I think the first step is really being a critical friend to every pharma, whatever stage they are. And today our business model is really like different levels. It's a data platform, is accessing models of prediction, and is actually using Okin knowledge to use these models within a clinical development workflow into clinical trials or into patient identification for commercialization. And so we have given 3 levels, and the 3 kind of fits at different pharma biotechs stages. Of course, data, it's never brokerage, it's remote access and execution of models by pharma data scientists. So I think like the fact we built these 3 layers really helped us out, and we are very fair and transparent on the results and what we expect and understanding the biology, and we're going deeply. So that kind of really worked out and seems to be a really scalable business model with these 3 layers. I think it's very hard. We choose the horizontal approach, having technology that is multimodal, multi-disease, and not really super focusing. And I think this is something that is a choice by our vision, Gilles and I. We think far, but sometimes it's hard because when you raise money, people want you to be hyper focused on something, right? So it's a choose. Do you want to be super vertical, or are you okay to be quite agnostic and horizontal? It's a really important question in the business of AI startup.
That's very profound, and I think that is going to be a big question that venture investors will be asking, but a pharma will also be asking. Corporate investors will be asking themselves that question because one thing that I actually heard in the MIT circles working with pharma was there were actually some of our big pharma companies coming to campus, and they were advising startups to not listen to VCs in this case, because the typical VC angle on things is close down, focus on one thing, do that well, and
Yeah.
then get your company a good price and some and some good money, and then just do that, get that thing into the clinic, and then we can start talking.
But we
But
had the chance to have we had the chance
yeah,
personally to have venture capitalists that understood that they wanted to also explore the business with us, and they understood the company of being hypothesis driven. When I raised money with Google Venture, our main investors, I went to San Francisco with Gilles, and we told them we are testing this business model. Is this the right one? We are not sure, and I don't know. And I think we've been. It was quite refreshing to hear from them, and I think just like no one knows exactly what's the future business model of AI, what's the right one. And I think we have to tell it like as it is and not oversell. French, we never oversell. It's something we should maybe learn to do. Uh,
No, in fact, I would argue you shouldn't learn because what these pharmas were telling me in turn, and honestly, they are partly to blame. So I don't know exactly why they blame the VCs, but they were saying, well, once we get to the company, and the presumption was, we don't invest early enough, the company is not as interesting as it was 5 years ago. So they
yeah,
were complaining that the VCs were destroying their companies, making them less platform based and much more focused on like single disease or single track mind, which in the end is an impossible decision to make that early in that kind of company.
yeah.
Anyway, but I mean, these
Like,
things
yeah,
I think
really,
will evolve.
the way to put it is like AI pharma always need to run and reinvent themselves really hard. You need to run to make cash, and if you have no cash, you need to grow. But today, like the thing with AI is revenues cannot be the only metrics. It's not a side business to scale your company and to raise. It's a lot of different stuff, right? It's how you actually like the data sets access. You edge technology, and there's a lot of things that being taken into account. We had very smart VCs that could understand that too, but of course, revenue is still like the best proof is how strong are you on the market. And I think also like people should not say revenue is not important. I'm gonna have a really great data access. If you have a great data access, you make money, right? and
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
need to translate this and to think about how you can scale your business.
Yeah.
And
It's not either or. Look, Thomas, it's been fascinating. Thank you so much. Thank you
yeah,
so much for
sorry
your
about that.
time. No
Thank you so much,
problem.
Ron. It's a pleasure. I'm
I
sorry.
love I love the conversation. I hope
Thank
to have you back on. We're gonna
you.
track on Futurized. We're gonna be tracking this field very closely. So I hope to have many of your peers on in the time to come.
Thank you so
Thanks a
much.
lot.
Right, Ron. Have a really good day. Cheers.
Okay.